All right, guys, Ms. Shim here. We're going to review for our test on chapters 13 and 14. I set this one up a little bit different than our other screencasts, so let's see how you guys like this one. Okay, when was the Dark Ages? 500 to 1000 AD. Hope you guys all got that one right. What was the church known as during the Dark Ages? A beacon of light, considering that's been the name of our two chapters, a light in the darkness. Why did the church have this name? If you remember, we talked about 3 different reasons. I said you're going to need to know them, kind of an overview of those. They protected the people and the teachings from the Viking invasions. What are 2 things Gregory the Great did to help in protecting the church? We discussed 5 of them. You only need to know 2. Organized Rome, gave to the poor, negotiated peace, reformed the liturgy, and compiled church music. Any 2 of those for the test. What are 3 things the monks did? Made laws, taught people how to farm, set up trade, and taught people to read, write, and count. Remember, read, write, and count does not count as 3 different things. It's only 1. What are some duties we have as Catholics? Okay, this will be one of your essays. I don't need word for word what I'm about to give you, but an overview of them. Things like serving others, forgiving, loving others, praying, listening to God, being humble. Okay, what is a virtue? That kind of goes into our duties as a Catholic. You know, having these virtues, habits that need to be practiced. What does a virtue do for us? We discussed this a little bit. It leads us to a closer relationship with Jesus. What are the theological virtues? You definitely need to know these. Faith, hope, and love, or if you put charity, that's also acceptable. What are the cardinal virtues? You also need to know these. Prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. Okay, so make sure you know those 7 virtues, which ones are cardinal, which ones are theological. What emperor protected the church? Remember, we really only talked about 1 emperor in these 2 chapters, and it was Charlemagne. Okay, Constantine's already done and out of the picture from last chapter, so wipe him out of your mind. It's only Charlemagne. What is one of Charlemagne's problems? What was the big issue that Charlemagne protecting the church created? It was that the church leaders forgot that they serve God. Remember my funny little pictures. Bishop, king, question mark, who do I listen to? Remember, they didn't know. What pope tried to reform the church? So now that we don't know who we follow, a certain pope came in to make changes. That's where Gregory the Seventh comes in. Okay, don't get him confused with Gregory the Great. What did Pope Gregory the Seventh teach us? We discussed this. All true authority comes from God. What is lay investiture? The practice of political leaders assigning jobs to bishops and priests. What was the story between Gregory the Seventh and Henry the Fourth? Remember, there are 4 steps to this. Let's see if you know them. 1, Gregory fought lay investiture. He said, this is now illegal, we can't do it. Henry came back by ignoring it. He was still going to appoint bishops and priests. So Gregory, in return, threatened to excommunicate him, and then Henry begged for forgiveness. All right, what was one interesting fact about Henry's begging for forgiveness? We talked about different things that made it kind of weird as opposed to just him coming and saying, please forgive me. He did it in the snow, he was barefoot, and he was dressed in monk's robes. Any one of those will work for the test. What is the break between the Eastern and Western churches known as? The Great Schism. Remember, this happened because the church in the West was so busy protecting itself from the Vikings that they had stopped communicating with the church in the East, and slowly but surely they started to split apart until both leaders excommunicated the other one from their church. Speaking of which, what is excommunication? Being completely cut off from the church and the sacraments. Okay? What are 3 differences between the Eastern and Western churches? We went over many of these. You only need to know 3. In the east, it's Constantinople. In the west, it's Rome. In the east, they have a patriarch. In the west, they have a pope. In the east, priests can marry. In the west, they can't. In the east, they speak Greek. In the west, we speak Latin, or at least we did until the Second Vatican Council. Also, we have a different belief on the use of statues, beliefs on original sin, and the Holy Spirit's place in the Trinity. Any three of those you can use on the test. Okay, we have about 6. What are the current relations between East and West? We talked about this, and it's that we are working to repair the split. Okay, the Pope and the Patriarch are still working today to bring us together as one church. What are the Crusades? If you remember, they are holy wars fought to regain the Holy Land. I hope you know what the Holy Land is. It's Israel or Canaan. There were how many crusades over what period of time? 8 crusades over 200 years. Okay, what 3 religions fought over the Holy Land? Christians practice Christianity, Muslims practice Islam, Jews practice Judaism. Okay, make sure we remember that. Who can they all trace their roots back to? Okay, we know they all believe in the same God, but who was the person that we said they could trace back to? When we talked about it, it is Abraham. Okay. A person who spreads a teaching contrary to that of God is a heretic. The teaching that they spread is a heresy. Don't get those two confused. One is the teaching, one is the person who spreads it. The church's court to investigate heretics was known as the Inquisition. All right, that was the court the church set up to stop heretics before it got to the legal side of it. Okay, the church was dealing with them before they got prosecuted by the government. What are some important differences between church and state? This is also going to be an essay. Remember, we put that chart in your notes. We talked about holidays. In church, we have holy days of obligation. Government, we have, state holidays or, government holidays. Laws, we have the commandments, we have the Constitution. Okay, very different laws that come from both of those. And we talked about schools, public schools as opposed to private Catholic schools, and how they are run differently because of the fact that there is that separation between church and state and why it's so important. What does mendicant mean? We talked about multiple mendicant orders, and the word mendicant meant something in particular. It was the Latin word for begging, because remember, they practiced poverty. They gave up what they had and they went out and had to ask people, hey, can I stay here? Hey, can I have food? Hey, can I do this? They begged for what they needed. The 2 mendicant orders that we really focused on were the Franciscans and the Dominicans. And then we know Franciscans were founded by St. Francis of Assisi. The Dominicans were founded by St. Dominic, not Dominic Savio. Do not put him on your test. Who was a famous Dominican teacher? It's not St. Dominic. We didn't talk about him, but we did talk about St. Thomas Aquinas. We also talked about what he wrote. First, we talked about his nickname, which was the dumb ox, because he was very slow in giving answers when he was a student. He wrote Summa Theologia, or a summary of theology, right? Summa Theologia is the name of it. That is the Latin for summary of theology, right? That's about it, guys. As long as you had an idea of some of these answers, you should be fine for the test tomorrow. Hope everyone had a great weekend. I'll see you tomorrow morning.